That's just your inner child. Your inner child never dies. At what point do you become an adult? Is it age? Is it time? You become an adult when you learn from your experiences, when you understand you've got trauma. Everyone's got trauma. It's about how do you heal from your trauma? Are you even aware of your trauma? Because a lot of people are just walking out, including myself. I wasn't aware of my traumas until like recently. I was like, actually, I think like that. I wasn't born to think like that. I've been through something that makes me think like that. So when you actually start to reflect, again, self-reflection, introspect, sit down with yourself, understand, why do I act a certain way? Why do I react like this? Why do I always have an outburst? Why do I feel insecure? Why do I feel with this? Why do I always lash out or self-sabotage when I end up in certain scenarios?
Hi, and welcome to the Hidden Lives 2024 online conference. My name is Chukwemeka Eko. I truly hope that what you're about to watch will be useful information for you, either from a parental perspective or as an educational working in the school setting. Whatever it is, we hope that this will be very impactful for you. Hidden Lives, why that title? Well, Hidden Lives is, in essence, to bring to mind, to the forefront, the very notion that those children we see in educational settings at home have private lives that informs their habits and behaviors. Sadly, the private lives are at times hidden from parents themselves, which can overwhelm them in terms of trying to deal with the children. We have assembled a panel of experts, both educationalists and therapists, to shed some light towards explaining what these habits and why these habits occur, and then give some strategies in terms of how we could possibly begin to address them and help to visualize what tomorrow may look like either in a home setting or in a school setting. Okay, good morning. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to Hidden Lives Conference. Now, there's a saying that every creation begins with a thought. And so I think it's fair to say that subsequent thoughts are informed by experiences. One thing to gain from this is that the behaviors we encounter with respect to young people, facade of behavior, and I use the word facade in that no child is more or less born with evil intent. It's all learned habits. Behind that is a whole myriad of hidden life experiences that, when I say hidden, as in hidden from us, the professionals, and in many cases hidden from the parents, that informs their habits and behaviors. So once again, thank you for coming onto this platform. I would like to thank our attendees and speakers. The scenario today is that we're going to have an introduction. Then I'm going to explain about childhood experiences and how it influences life outcomes. We're going to go into trauma, how it impacts on learning, looking at things like intergenerational trauma and why children get excluded. Guest speaker Patience will be talking about challenging family lives, poverty within homes and community and its impact. David Morley will be talking about young people can be resilient given time and direction. He'll give us a reflection of reality using his own life experiences. Joanna will be talking to us about combating childhood trauma. She'll be touching a bit about how it informs us about attachment theory and how it affects children's ability to relate. We've been talking about how our rigid systems are failing children and insights as to why some of our systems are not working. We will be seeing Patricia Waddell, who will be speaking to us about investing in children and young people's future. She'll tell us about the importance of ensuring young people are supported to fulfill their potential. Gentlemen, to present to us about being parents, important parents, being present and engaging, why it's essential for normal childhood development. So he was going to look at the difference between a parent being present and the parents engaging, how that would have affects a child's development. Then finally, we have Leonis, who's a manager at a community center. And he was going to talk to us about children are the solutions to many of the problems that we see. And he's going to present a case for children being the solution. Okay, so that's the format for today. What will happen is at the end, we'll get time for Q&As. And the basis that the ones I'm covering, I'll try and keep that short so that will expand our opportunity to do Q&A. Now, it's my understanding that we have an attendee is dialing in from abroad. So thank you and welcome for being on board. Those of us who are on the platform, when we get to Q&A, it's not necessarily just asking questions. If you have useful information that will benefit us all, then please, we look forward to that contribution. I will start with childhood experiences. And before I go forward, is there any questions at this point, please? No? Okay, brilliant. I'll start with childhood experiences and how it influences outcome. I'll start with one person. His experience was that as a child, what we tend to find is that people, young people, children and young people have developed deep trust in their caregivers, who are primarily their parents. So what then happens if the caregiver gives the wrong advice or what I'll call inappropriate upbringing? So in this instance, what transpired was that the father was advising them to get into criminal activity. And the view of the siblings was that, well, it's our father. He has never failed us. So surely there can't be anything wrong with what he's suggesting. And now what the guest was saying, that why his outcome was different, that he stood back and reflected and then said, and saw the path that two of his siblings were going down, as in one got a prison sentence, and decided that it wasn't for him. Now, there has been a few cases along this where, and I suspect some of you may have come across this already, where two twins were questioned and discussed about their life outcomes. So they both had the same father, they grew up in the same house. One became a father of 3 children, a loving dad, a caring husband. His twin ended up in prison and he was an absent father. So when questioned, why was their life the way it is? One responded, well, if you look at my history, it would explain why I am the way I am. So his reasoning was, well, if my father was a criminal, then naturally I will become a criminal. The tendency to become a criminal, that was his explanation. Whilst the other twin said, well, I looked at my father and realized that his path wasn't good enough for me and I didn't want it for my children. So I made sure that I did the exact opposite of whatever he did. I was present. I attended parents' meetings. I took my children to school. I was there for them. As I got secured work to create a stable environment for them. So in that context, it shows his explanation in the discussion I had with him was that showing how growing up with childhood, how it can affect the life outcomes of an individual. Now, second speaker was a mentor for many of our young children. And he was explaining that the challenge he had with one particular child was that his job being a mentor was to advise them and motivate them to work hard. But in this instance, he said that the young boy had a conflicting emotion. What it was that his father and his brother were both in prison, or the sibling were both in prison. The young boy was asking him what he should do. The reason being that the mentor was telling the boy, okay, you need to focus, buckle down, do your revision, get your qualification, go to college, explore apprenticeship programs, and, create a stable career for yourself. However, the young boy explained that his father and older sibling were telling him that, look, education doesn't get you anywhere. You will never make money out of it. They both are career criminals. They were both at that very time in prison. And they were telling them, just go make money stealing things. And if you get caught, it's fine. Being that they've been to so many prisons and knew so many people across so many prisons that they would cover his back. They would tell their friends in those prisons to look out for him and protect him. So in which case, it was, as far as they're concerned, crime pays. So you could see there the conflicts he had in the young person and not knowing which way to turn. I could say that fortunately, according to him, the outcome was quite positive in that he managed to keep the young person studying, and he's currently at the moment doing his year 2 college. So that was the account in terms of childhood experiences, how it can influence life outcomes. Okay, we'll go on to trauma impacts on learning, intergenerational trauma. So I'm going to keep this one real brief. There's something called intergenerational trauma, that many of us carry trauma from childhood that we're unaware of. And I heard one person explain it that many adults are really young people at heart carrying large burdens that they're not aware of. And this is one of our speakers, and I'll hopefully expand on that later on. So to explain this intergenerational trauma, I will use my experience in that in primary school, year 4, a very good friend of mine, his father was a drug dealer. And at the age of 4, he was already selling cannabis in school. And he would usually come into school, smell of cannabis, and sometimes it was notable that he was, shall we say, high. What's happened, obviously, starting from a very young age, smoking cannabis, is that I saw him about 10 years ago in London. And by accounts of all the people I keep in touch with, his memory loss was quite significant. Unfortunately, because of the way his upbringing was, in terms of his own father's upbringing was very similar. His dad brought him up the way he was brought up. And then he then has grown up into an adult in the same substance abuse. So it's affecting his life. Now, what we're going to look at in this context is that how many of the children we see in school are behaving a certain way, and what are those hidden issues in the background that's affecting their habits and their behaviors. I would like to draw your attention to another young person, and this one actually touched me quite a lot. So the boy was very aggressive towards the staff, got quite physical, was known to hit out on staff members. But on looking at his history, pretty much from primary school, he more or less brought himself up. Now, what was peculiar about this is that he was living in a house with his older sibling, both parents, and grandma. Grandma was, in essence, the original house owner, a drug addict. Dad grew up and picked up the habit and did not engage much in education. This young man then had to more or less fend for himself from primary school, was known to cook for himself when he got home, took himself to school, came back, all through his secondary education, but then didn't really value education because he didn't feel valued. Didn't discuss it until pushed to try and identify what the issue was. And he repeatedly said that education wasn't really a solution for him. He saw school as a placeholder, as in that I am mandatory required to be in school, but school is not my priority. So consequently, he did not really engage and found authority difficult because at home, he was never given instructions or directions. So the way he saw it was, teachers are not his parents. If his parents could not give him instructions and did not give him instructions, then who were the teachers and the educators and the therapeutic education practitioners or teaching assistants to give him instruction or hold authority over him, as through most of his life, nobody had that authority over him. So that was the challenges he faced. So these are ways in which intergenerational trauma, and if you look at this now, he will likely grow up into an adult, carrying the same burdens and mindsets into his future life. And one hopes that something would change along the way, because you could see the potential as a parent, how he could pass such habits towards his own children. Because even though, and as we mentioned before, even though his parents were present, they were not engaging. So what would be the outcome for him as a parent in future? It's not saying it's written in stone, but you can see the potential for that. And these are some of the situations many of our young people face. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Patience, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, super. Thank you very much. Patience is a very, how can I put this, a very passionate and consummate professional. And from since knowing Patience, in her dress code, in her approach to work, in her attitude, in trying to help families and the community, she's very well driven, looks into details really well. And I truly believe that we'll learn a lot from listening to what Patience has to tell us. So Patience, you're going to talk to us about challenging family lives and allude to how poverty within homes and community can impact children's behavior. But I think what may be useful, if I ask you a particular question from a quote I heard you say once, and this is this, it says, as human beings, we live with other people in society, so we need to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. If you have not experienced love, can you expand on that at all, please?
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, sir, for that introduction. Yes, we live in a society as human beings. So in a nutshell, there's another saying when it comes to our young people, that it takes a village to raise a child. Now, teachers are also part of the village. Caregivers are part of the village. We are part of that community. Now, in a home, whoever the carer is, whether you've been fostered or adopted, or you've got both parents or one parent at home. So as carers and parents, we need to parent. That child becomes your child, whether you are the biological parent or not. Now, to love, for a child to experience love, as you said earlier, is the environment the child is being raised in. Is the child being parent or has the child been left alone? Now, a child being left alone has vacuum. The child is not being mentored by the parents or by the caregivers. So therefore, the child will only give out what the child is receiving in the environment in which this child is being raised in. So if a child is constantly being criticized, for example, as well, and not being praised, the child doesn't know what it means even to receive praise. That's another aspect to look at it. Also, if the child is not experiencing love from the carer or the parent, the hugs, kisses on the cheeks, supporting the child to wear clothes, ties, shoelace, the basics of childhood. If the child is not receiving that, the child is not experiencing love. So I will use a very short case study as well. We had kids that we've worked with, especially those that I've met in the unit and the families. And I noticed one particular parent who thought she was parenting correctly. But this particular parent had daughters, and they are a set of twins. But when this parent is out, when I say she's out, she uses substances. So when she's out and slept off, the kids are not in school because they can't wake up themselves. Who knows? Have they taken anything themselves? Because they've been exposed to illicit substances themselves. History, elder brother has been arrested a few times dealing in drugs. So this environment that these young children were growing up in up until the age of 14 or 13 when they were picked up by the school. We don't know how far they've gone in terms of taking illicit substances themselves, whether it's by accident or just by trying to taste it because mommy is using it, big brother is using it. That is very dangerous environment. They didn't know what it was to be cared for. So I'm using this scenario because that was the first case that my boss, who thought she's retired at that time, gave to me and said, listen, I know you can do this with this family. Find out what's going on. So I had to dig, and I found out that mom also was raised in similar environment and has nothing to give but what she knows. That's what she was giving to the kids, thinking that was love. That was not love. So the kids didn't know what it meant to be loved until we started to show them what love was really about. We also found out that they were living in extreme poverty. And again, we had to make sure that these children were being fed correctly, because you could tell they were not eating well. They were constantly ill. Dentist. I mean, there was so much going on. It was just so sad. So when I had to report this case, and Pat, if you don't mention, I'll mention your name if you don't mind. Patricia supported me in bringing this family to where they should be in terms of just fending for them, buying clothes for them, shopping and dropping it at their doorstep in their house. That is love. They experienced that. And their mother, on one occasion, cried and said, Patience, no one has ever paid such attention to me the way you have done. So this is love. These kids will come to school, and when you're trying to show them love, they'll fight you. But eventually they realize that we actually love them. This is what love is. So before they left, they were receptive to love. They were receptive. Mom also learned what it meant to love and how to care for her children. Sometimes she will call and say, Patience, they don't want to come to school. Can you call them? Can you get them out? Now she's being proactive, whereas before she didn't know what to do. So the environment reads, Mom was raised in a certain way, and she's raising her kids in that way. So there was a lot to this. Don't want to take too much time, but that's just a typical example.
Thank you. So, thank you for that. I guess it kind of links in two other quotes that I heard you say, which was, how you are feeling emotionally is how you would treat others.
Fantastic.
And also heard you say, if you don't trust yourself, you will not trust anyone.
Right.
So, yeah. So I could see why you made those quotes. Obviously, my experience of working with less family, as an example.
Yes. Okay. So the first quote. Can you repeat the first quote for me?
Okay. Well, actually, I wanted to give you another quote. I was just saying that I could see why you made such a quote, because of that experience. But what I wanted to ask you is, you also said at the end of the school day, someone needs to be there to ask them how their day was. Was it good? Was it bad? No accusations, no shouting. Don't make them feel guilty. Hear them out and correct them.
Hallelujah. That's the one. Yes, that is so important. Because when a child returns from school, as soon as they get through the front door, if you are there, welcome them. How are you today? Regardless of how you, the adult, the parent or the carer, regardless of how you are feeling, hide that and embrace the child. Welcome home. How was school today? Even if they've done something bad, that's when you sit them down and say, listen, what happened? What did you do today? Just tell me, and we see what we can do about it. Have that conversation. And that is caring. That's having time for your child. If it's a good day, praise the child. And say, well done. You went into class today. You've attended all your lessons. Well done. Whether they had low grades, medium grades, or big grades, congratulate them for making that baby step, because we're trying to bring them back. But before they even get to that stage of going into a unit or having behavior issues, start this from the time your child start going to school. Don't make your job a priority over your children, because there's a time when you say to yourself, let me put my job aside for 5 minutes for today and let me have time with my child. So coming home and welcoming your child home is very important. Have you eaten? What did you eat for lunch? I will give one of my children as an example. As soon as school finished, even if I'm in a meeting, she has to call me as she enters the train. So as soon as she called me, I'll get up and answer that call. I'm on the train, mommy. I said, good. How was school today? This is even before she gets home, because I know she'll be home before me. So I must have that conversation so that she can have that security and experience that care and love before she gets home and before I get home. So, and it's something I believe every parent should practice, because I believe that prevention is better than cure. And if the issue is already there, start practicing it and let that child continue to experience that love.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very insightful. In fact, I believe that this is useful information for myself. I feel I'm learning from this, and hopefully our audience is taking away a lot from it. Thank you very much. I would like to invite our next speaker, David Morley, to speak to us about young people, how young people can be resilient, given time and direction. David, are you with us, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Peace.
Excellent. Excellent. So David is a motivational speaker, has extensive experience working with young people. My observation is that you're able to somehow get them to trust you so that you can establish the relationship very quickly and guide them. I've seen you give them direction to get them even start reading books, which is quite interesting, because young people find that, my observation, they find it very hard to read books. But the fact that you actually got them reading was just really, I was quite taken back by that. So thank you for that. It was a useful experience for me. But I would like to start off with a quote. And by this quote, I want you to basically show us a bit of reality in using your own life. So your quote was, "That image of mom crying became so engraved in my mind that I never want to see that again."
First of all, Chuck, man, thanks for having me on here, bro. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Yes.
Howard, you see, for a lot of us people, seeing our mother cry is like a very important moment in our lives. And for me, watching my mum cry in that environment which I was in the actions I was doing, in my decisions at the time, really led me into this self-reflection stage, really thinking about where am I heading? Who am I? Who am I becoming? Because see, when we're young, we move very subconsciously. We're not very intentional of our actions. We just go off of the programmings in which we've been educated in. So in education or in religion or in our social circles or in the social media, we just kind of follow whatever it is we've been looking at. So when I saw my mom cry in the hospital that day, and I had a lot of time on my hands when I was recovering, I really started thinking, what is my vision and what impact do I want to have in the world? Because I could have just easily have died. I got stabbed in the chest, for those that didn't know. And after I started doing that reflection, I decided who I wanted to be and what impact I wanted to have in the world. That's when I started working with young people to be able to kind of pass my experiences on to them. And for some weird reason, there's this talent of mine that I have where I can have empathy for other humans, other people. Mm-hmm. And that's a skill that a lot of us no longer have, the empathy. And it's not that we don't have it, we're just not consciously aware of how to use it or how to tap into it. So that essentially, in a short answer, is what I meant by when I saw my mum cry. That was a big moment and a shift in my life. Not to take too much time from you, Chuck.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. That brilliant. Please, well said. Right. So here, I'm going to go to another one of your quotes, and it's this. "This, however, does not mean that if another child does not have a great ability at retaining and recalling information, they are a failure. It simply means that it is not their strength." Now, before you expand on this, the reason I went for this is that I'm thinking, and I've seen myself being in a classroom where you got a class of 30 students, 27, whatever it is, and you can see some are struggling. And that quote kind of struck with me in that is a question in the back of my head is that, is the academic system suitable for everybody? Or is it, in fact, even better still, is it working for everybody? Okay, that's a bigger question. And indeed, it's one that one of our guests kind of was going to go into, but so I'll let you respond to that. Can you expand on that?
Okay,
this does not mean that if another child does not have a great ability at retaining and recalling information, they're a failure.
There's a quote that says, "You can't judge an elephant's ability on climbing a tree." So what that means essentially is there's so many different intelligence types that we can't expect all these people, these young people, to have the same intelligence type. So the education system, one intelligence type they focus on is information retention, which is memory. Memory is not something that you have to really learn. It's something that you're born with. Like you put a young person in Japan, they're going to learn how to speak Japanese. You put them in Nigeria, they're going to learn how to speak Yoruba, like just naturally. So when you've got someone like for me, for example, I'm a very hands-on tactile person. I can't sit in a classroom and take information in for 8 hours in a day. I need to do something physical. But because in the education scenario, it seems like I'm not intelligent because I can't sit still for so long. So they say I'm ADHD, they say I'm X, Y, Z. But it just means that you're trying to teach me something that doesn't benefit me in any way, shape, or form. It's not tapping into my strengths, my intelligence type. You know what I mean? So now Larry and David are being compared when it's just apples and oranges. Me and Larry are different people. He's just tapped into this. This is his strength. This isn't my strength. You know what I'm saying? So if you put me in a certain scenario where Larry doesn't excel, I now look like I'm more intelligent than Larry, but that's not the case. Larry's just not. This is Larry's weakness. So where I say that to say, with young people, you just need to know what is their strengths, and with their parents as well. Parents don't nurture their children, like Patience was saying. So you put your children in a school for 8 hours in a day. You're also at work for about 10 hours in a day. Your kid comes home, is on social media, X, Y, Z. At what point do you get to declutter their programming or whatever it is that they're learning in school? At what point do you get to tap in with them and feed into them and pour into them and nurture them like parents should do? You just give your kids over to these strangers that you don't know if they're teaching your kids to their strengths. You don't know if they have empathy. You don't know if they're just there to get a paycheck. You don't know any of these things, but you trust the system that they're doing the best for your children. That is crazy to me. You got to sit with your children for at least 2 hours in a day and just pour into them. What are your strengths? What do you enjoy doing? What is your vision? Where do you want to go? Do you want a job? Are you a worker? Do you have a slave mindset? Do you have an ownership mindset? That way you start to pour into them. Now you're feeding. Now you're getting some sort of feedback. Now you're parenting. You're not a parent just because you've given birth to a child. You're a parent when you start to nurture your child, when you know your child's strengths, when you know your child's weaknesses. That's how we start to progress. And again, that's what I meant by that quote.
Excellent. To round off, there is one I really liked. And it says, there are a lot of adults who are just broken young people. And I alluded to this early on. They are just broken teenagers with trauma and are walking around with luggage whilst projecting a persona to protect their insecure child.
See, that's just your inner child. Your inner child never dies. At what point do you become an adult? Is it age? Is it time? You become an adult when you learn from your experiences, when you understand you've got trauma. Everyone's got trauma. It's about how do you heal from your trauma? Are you even aware of your trauma? Because a lot of people are just walking out, including myself. I wasn't aware of my traumas until like recently. I was like, actually, I think like that. I wasn't born to think like that. I've been through something that makes me think like that. So when you actually start to reflect, again, self-reflection, introspect, sit down with yourself, understand, why do I act a certain way? Why do I react like this? Why do I always have an outburst? Why do I feel insecure? Why do I feel this? Why do I always lash out or self-sabotage when I end up in certain scenarios? That's what I mean by your inner child. So when you start doing your inner child healing and you become aware of your inner child, because that insecure child within yourself, that 9-year-old that went through whatever they went through, and now you're 50 years old, but that inner child is still screaming at you. Like, pay me some attention. I'm here. I've got this trauma. You've been through this, but you're not healing. So you want to walk around blindly with the blindfolds on. So when you start to heal your inner child, that's when you start to go up, because you shift your perspective. I always say this to people. There's no literal ladder that you're climbing in life. You only really change levels or move up in life when you change your perspective. Because once you heal something, you get a new perspective. And once you get a new perspective, you start to see the world differently. And when you start to see the world differently, that's when you start to elevate, and that's when you start to teach other people, and that's when you start to share your value. Then that becomes a value, because now I've been through this. Now there's someone else that's going through what I've been through. Like, how did you get there? X, Y, this is what I've done. This is what. That's when you start to impact. That's when you start to have impact in the world. That's when you start to expand the universe, because the universe is always expanding. So all it takes is for us to sit down with ourselves, decide, just realize, what is my traumas? Meditate, pray to God, do whatever you need to do that gets you into that consciousness, and start healing. And now you become an adult. You're not just an adult by entitlement. You don't become an adult just by time. You become an adult. You become a man or a woman when you just gone back into your wisdom and you tapped into your understanding of your experiences. That's when you start to move on. That's when you start to heal that inner child and you become one with your inner child, as opposed to having a shadow self where you're always pushing it onto, oh no, I'm not this, or I'm not confident, or I'm not a public speaker, or I'm not loving, or I'm not empathetic. You start to push that away from you because you're not healing. You've got that trauma within you for whatever reason. It might be the programming. It might be your parent didn't love you as a young person. Whatever it is, there's no judgment. Everyone's got them. Everyone's walking around with baggages. But the aim is to elevate that baggage somehow, help each other in some way, shape, or form, especially these young people. We've got to be very empathetic to them because they are growing up in a time that we've never seen before. It's a big, big technology time. So it's like a lot of mental stimulation is going on at the same time. So they are getting their sort of traumas in their own way. And if no one's helping them now, they're just going to be like us, adults, walking around with a bag of baggages, hurting and bleeding on each other because no one's teaching them how to begin that healing journey, how to start that process, how to really tap into yourself, how to be confident, not self-doubt, how not to be fearful and do the things you need to do, how to actually listen to your own mind, the God within you, as opposed to listen to the program and the dogma that we've been educated in. And again, sure, that's what I kind of meant with that quote. And of course, I can't really get into the intricacies and the things that I really want to get into because we're short of time and I don't want to take anyone else's time. So Powers, man, peace. I hope you get some sort
Thank you very much. In fact, on that statement itself, you said some very powerful things. Thanks very much.
Peace, Powers.
Excellent. Okay, so at this point, I would like to bring in our next guest, Joanna, who is a art therapist, to talk to us about combating childhood trauma. Joanna, are you with us, please?
Yes, hello. Hi, Chuck. Hi, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Right, I really, really value your expertise on this. Now, Joanna, you work for CAMS. Could you just basically expand on what CAMS is?
Yes, certainly. CAMS stands for Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, which is the part of the NHS that looks after the mental health of our young population up to the age of 18.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Now, I have a specific question I want to give you from one of your quotes, but there's something I think that's very valuable that I believe our audience and myself will gain from, and that is attachment theory. Right. So obviously people in your circle and your line of work would be very familiar with this, but for the benefit of our audience, could you explain the attachment theory and how it can affect a child's ability to relate?
Fantastic. Will do, yes. So attachment theory is 60 years old, so it's not something new. We learned about it after the Second World War. So John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth have come up with this theory that we are creatures of attachment, and I think attachment theory and trauma theory are pillars for my practice anyway. So John Bowlby and Mary observed attachment styles and attachment stages as well. We see this clearly in adolescents because we learn this as babies, and the avoidant attachment, the disorganized attachment, the ambivalent attachment are things that we still know. Attachment theory is a little bit outdated because, of course, is very old. And what we know now about neuroscience tells us that what John didn't know back 60 years ago is that the brain is plastic and can recover. So back 60 years ago, we thought that if you had a poor attachment and your parents had not give you that special care that you needed, you'd be doomed for life. But we now know that with the right environment, as patients said, and David, we can recover. It does take a village to raise a child. So if a child has exposed to a caregiver that maybe because of their own issues of transgenerational trauma, oppression, racism, all of these things that get in the mix, the deprivation, if people are not able to, are vulnerable themselves and have a child, and are fragile themselves and have a child, then the attachment may not be the best. And it happens even in the most affluent families anyway. People don't feel the love for their baby. We know that we can change with the right support. Schools are really geared up, the NHS, social services. If we put things in place, so sometimes a mentor can go a long way, a family support worker, a sport. Some of these things can really hold a child and really change their path, if that makes sense.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much. Right, so let's go into your quote, which kind of lends nicely to what you've just been explaining. The best treatment for trauma is not prescribing a therapy or medication for it. It's something relational. It's families, it's friends, it's having a good vibe about things.
Yes, I mean, if it depends. Trauma treatment depends who you speak to, because we have CBT, DBT, EMDR, all of these fancy words and fancy treatment styles that say they can cure treatment. But in my opinion, as a psychodynamically trained therapist, is that the best treatment is co-creating a narrative about what has happened to you rather than fix what has happened to you. Does that make sense? Rather than fix what is wrong with you, if that makes sense. So we don't know, in this day and age, we can't delete a traumatic experience like you delete a file on your computer. We're not there yet. We may be in 100 years, 50 years, we may be able to delete a traumatic experience. And that may be quite beneficial, if you ask me. But we're not there. We can't delete that. But we can make sense together. So that togetherness, that jointly, the we. So we can use with kids that are traumatized. I often tell professionals that we need to use the we instead of the you. You need to do homework. You need to think about your future. You need to, and there's, we need to do homework. Let's do this. Let's do that. That togetherness is very important because we are dependent creatures. And before you can self-regulate, you have to co-regulate, you see. So we need some of the traumatic experience can make a child regress and feel like a baby. So you need to meet them where they are. And if they need lots of hugs or for you to be there or for a one-to-one in school, or, you need to meet them where they are and be there for them. So it's not just a therapist's job to fix that child. Oh, that's give it to CAMS and CAMS will fix it, or CAMS is rubbish because they didn't take it's for everyone. So one thing that I do often is to work with the networks, to work with the professionals, because my work goes a long way if we all have a shared understanding and a common narrative and share those ideas on empathy and what has happened and what is the chronology and work in a way that is non-shaming, non-blaming, and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just again, for the benefit of our audience, can you just give us just briefly what art therapy would involve? That's an example. So if you had
yes.
What would you typically be doing with the art?
Yes, certainly. So art therapy is... So I'm a CAMS specialist clinician. I do other things other than art psychotherapy because I've been in the business for many years, and what I've learned is art therapy alone is not the magic bullet. And some kids may not even want to tolerate to be in a room with me. So art therapy is a form of is one of the 3 creative therapies that uses art as a means of communication. So it could be helpful for kids that don't have the words for their feelings, or they have speech difficulties or language barriers, or people that just don't want to say what has happened. So they can use the drawing on volcanoes, they can punch clay, they can use all sorts of media to express things that otherwise they wouldn't have words for. I use art therapy, and I use, of course, verbal communication in my work, and it's a mix of the two, really, for me.
Okay. Finally, there's something you said that shows that was filled with enthusiasm, optimism, and it's this. You said we can be very hopeful for the next generation. They are amazing teenagers. We just need to understand them better. So what makes you so optimistic, given, for example, one of the basis of this conference is that the rate of exclusions is going up. Yes, there's a whole range of reasons, but so why being optimistic? What's behind optimism?
Yes, I do see the cup half full. So that is a trait of my personality, and it's because I'm privileged and I had, I guess, an upbringing that made me be that way. But I think of Greta Thunberg. She's 20. She's less than half my age, and she changed the world. So you have people out there that are half my age that I have so much respect for. I think the new generation, they are more socially conscious. They know about empathy. They are emotionally intelligent. I think social media is a problem. The way the current government has eroded services is a big problem. And I work in and live in Newham, and Newham is a problem. The cities are becoming very big, very polluted. There's no green spaces. There's not a skate park in Newham. How do you how can you even go out and have fun if there's not a skate park? We have 40% of the population is under 25, so it's a huge young population. And according to the Financial Times, 65% of our children live in poverty. So the reality around me is absolutely dire, the issues of housing and so forth. And we can't certainly fix poverty. We can't fix things like that with therapies. Is it a social care issue? Is everybody's issue, if you ask me. We all have the duty of care. But, the primary needs need to be met. I don't know, I'm going in a tangent now. I'm not sure if I answer your question, Chuck.
No, you actually did initially right at the start, and well eloquently put. Thank you very much for your time. It's really useful information, very technical. And once again, I believe that our audience would find that valuable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we need to call in our next guest, Patricia Wardell, to speak to us about investing in children and young people's future. Pat, are you there with us, please?
I'm here.
Excellent, Pat.
Right.
Now, I will need about another hour to go through Pat's track record, which is just formidable. In terms of being deputy head of school, hasn't represented UK in the Commonwealth Games, sports personality, a coach, a sports referee for young people. Is currently involved in artificial intelligence, looking at safeguarding matters for our young people. So there's a whole range of things I could go into. But the reason I say is that I've always found Pat to be absolutely enthusiastic for anything to do with young people, as are all our guest speakers. Now, Pat, the one thing I'd like you to, in fact, the starting point is a word you said, which is bouncer backability, right? I love that. So could you please tell us what you mean by that, please?
Okay, morning, everyone. Yes, obviously, yes, Pat Andrews. It's really weird to kind of like be here and, obviously listen to all those professionals and to listen to David. I have the utmost respect for David. David has evolved into a wonderful young man. And I think that's where I come from. I just love to see when someone can pull out the best in themselves. And I think that's where the bounce back ability comes from. He's had setbacks. He's had places times when he's really been in a dark place. But for some reason, what's happened, he's searched really deep inside to find that place where he wants to be in a different place, in a positive place. And that's what it is about, that bounce back ability. It's come from a sporting perspective, really. I read up on it and why I kind of picked it up. Sport is somewhere where you do find that you have lots of setbacks. You may get injured. You may have an injury that sets you back a few months or even a year. So it's a case of, how do you get yourself back? How do you get yourself to that place where you're a positive kind of influence and an influencer in the world? So the bounce back ability has come from there, and it's been demonstrated, as this morning. And so I love that word. And it's not just about sport. You can bounce back in any form. And so this is why I use it. And I try and kind of push it onto other people as well. So that's where it's come from.
Excellent. So, Pat, you've actually got a lot of quotes, which I find amazing. And I love all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a few together and see if you could give us some reasoning behind it. So first quote, it says, if the parental drive isn't there to support them and to put them where they should be, that's where it could be very difficult to see where the gaps could be filled. And if you could put that together and explain this one, it says, I believe that if we can break that cycle with just one of those individuals in the family, then that might just start the trend to making that charge in that family, that change in that family.
Yeah, I think where I'm coming from in terms of that perspective is I've been in various settings. So I started my career in mainstream, and I'm a professional like PE teacher, sports kind of motivator, sports coach, and obviously that's the place I kind of come from. So when I arrived at the pupil referral unit, I felt the sense of the lack of parental support. And for me, parental support is a lot. I mean, you've heard from the practitioners that work tirelessly with families that are the hard to reach, and the disengaged, the disenfranchised, and potentially had not great experiences themselves in the school setting. So when you have that element of the lack of the value of education, it's very hard to then inspire the next generation. And I know what we had with patients, where she said it was very difficult to work with the family, that where mother had the very worst of kind of upbringings and no real direction herself. So that was obviously then kind of placed onto the way in which she brought her own daughters up. So it's a case of, how do we break the cycle? So it's a case of, how do we ensure that we can find the best in that child, and then obviously translate that to the family. I remember once when I was in mainstream in a girls' school, and the parents sat in front of me saying, well, my daughter doesn't need to come to school to study. And this is a father. And I thought, well, that was obviously, it threw me really. I've never ever heard a parent not wanting the best for their child. And I did a bit of work with this family, not just myself, the mentors, the therapists, the social care and what have you. And we started to change his perspective on where his daughter could potentially travel in life. But we had to break down a lot of barriers and a lot of perceptions and his core values. Obviously, his values were different to the mainstream setting. And it's what David was saying about the adults in front of that individual child makes all the difference. So it's a case of just, how do we break the cycle? And it's a lot of work because we know trauma sits very deeply within people, and it's been said that trauma, you can hide trauma, you can work with trauma, but you work with it in a different way. It skews your perspective. It kind of has very different kind of takes on how you are as an adult. So it is very difficult to work with a child if the parental support is not there. And the thing is, I come from a sporting perspective. So when I've only known parents that will get up every day and taxi their children to sport, football, hockey, ice skating, swimming. If you're a swimming parent out there, by the way, they do the 5 o'clock mornings and then take their child to school after that. That's why I made sure that my son wasn't good at swimming because I didn't want to do the 5 o'clock. I really didn't want to do the 5 o'clock mornings. I really didn't. And also I didn't want to be a really good cricketer because I don't want to give up my whole Saturday. But I still was there as a parent. So it is difficult to ensure that that parental support is there.
Excellent, Pat. Thank you. In a way, you've alluded to this within your speech, what you've been saying, but I want to look at something additionally positive, and that's two quotes I'm going to combine together. One says, there is always a need to question what is being done and for what purpose. Yeah. So that was in response to trying to turn their lives around, turn the lives of young people around. And once they've got that, that child can soar, aspire, and achieve.
Yeah, I think I came from the perspective of, ensuring that there is a support network. We've heard about the child, lives within a village, so it takes a village to raise a child. So it's a case of, I work in sport still, and I work with the London Youth Games. And the London Youth Games is borough-wide, Greater London. So you've got 32 boroughs and 25 sports. So what you've got there is you've got all the mayors, you've got all the sporting setups in those boroughs. You've got funding coming from the government. So I know that some areas in Greater London, and I'm going to quote Wandsworth. Wandsworth was facing youth crime, and it was just increasing every year. So Wandsworth took it upon themselves to look at the recreational spaces. They looked at their youth centres. They looked at sport in general. Wandsworth, over, I'd say, about 12 years, started to change because it's not a quick fix. Wandsworth became one of those areas where sport was revered, where school sports was revered. And there was a real shift in the way that young people started to see their lives unraveling in Wandsworth. And it was really, really strange to see that. So I kind of did some background reading into did some kind of looking into Wandsworth. And the mayor set out his program, his plan to ensure that there was better housing, facilities for young people, and looking at the actual kind of experiences and the opportunities in Wandsworth. And I know now that Waltham Forest, where I live, has now become a borough for culture. And that's the case of now. There's lots of art festivals, there's street markets, there's youth activity. There's real kind of scope out there for young people. So in terms of changing and having the best opportunities for young people, it takes a lot more than just one kind of aspect of an area. It takes more than that. And this is why local authorities is very, very important. So I'm now working with another company that is looking at cricket in the community. But that's only because what they want to do, they want to do some outreach work with young people. And so they're opening up the cricket centres. They're opening up other opportunities. They're going into schools. So we've got cricket coaches going into school, and they're trying to launch programs that's going to give the vehicle for these children to see sport and activity as a way forward. So yeah, there's lots happening on the horizon. So I get what Joanne's saying, that there are opportunities for young people, but it's just a case of the adults ensuring that they are pointing and signposting those young people in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pat. Really useful. I could see from your experiences and your observations where and why you would pick up that word bounce back ability, because it's threading everything you've been saying. You know, there's optimism, as I said right at the start of the introduction before you spoke, and your approach to the thing. So I'm really grateful for that. Thank you very much, Pat. Okay, we'd like to go to our next speaker and our final speaker. I'm hoping that he's here with us, Leonis, who is a manager for Fight for Peace.
No, I'm going. I left already. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm very happy that you made it. Now, there's a very good reason why I asked you to step in as the final speaker, and that's because your approach, in terms of your perception, has a unique element to it. And it's the very idea that you believe that many of the problems that are raised, from your perspective, you believe that children should be part of the solution, if not the solution to that problem. And the fact that you do not necessarily see not that you don't see what they see as a problem, but they are being misunderstood. So I would like to present a case for children being the solution. So to start us off with, I would like to take one of your quotes, sir, and it's this. There is also this culture of young people becoming adults really quick.
Yeah, I think this is something that everyone's already aware of, but there's a lot of young people that work with, for example, there's a young lady right now, obviously I'm not going to say what her name is, but she's saying that her mom's, essentially depressed, she can't do nothing, and essentially she's got to cook herself and do everything herself. She's got to look after her younger brother. So essentially she's becoming the mom in the family, because her mom's not necessarily, she's there, but she's not necessarily present. So I think we're living especially in the UK right now, we're living in an age where young people start becoming adults from a really young age. I know David had a question earlier. The question was around at what point does someone become an adult? And my answer to that is when they start thinking like an adult. So when young people have to start thinking like an adult, do adult things, that's when they become an adult. But yeah, so I think obviously that's part of my experience as well. I had to become an adult really young as well, from 17. I know it sounds like a good age, but it really and truly I had to start thinking about where I'm going to live, I'm going to wash my clothes, I'm going to do everything. And I see that happening with young people at younger ages than that, like 14, 15, 16 sometimes. So, it's pretty straightforward, I guess, with that quote.
Okay. From my perspective as an educator, I could see a child in that situation. You can get one or two outcomes. So in a classroom environment, there's a possibility that if the child is forced to become an adult from early age, they could have a more matured outlook in the classroom. Or B, the workload they're taking on could mean that you see a child sleeping in the class, or they're tired in class. Or it could be the third option, which is that they're tired from the physical elements of their personal lives, so become rebellious or not engaged in effect. So it can go in other direction. So, which is one of the points of this whole conference for educators and indeed parents to become aware of what the life or the hidden aspects of the children's lives, which things are not obvious to us from the front. So the child might look okay, but not necessarily being okay from their personal and emotional life. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, I definitely agree, and I think Pat said it really well. It's called bounceability, and I think a lot of situations in life. I think the whole theme of this conversation in general is like there's a lot of situations for young people in life in general which can either make them or break them. And when it does that, and obviously spoke about perspective and the whole thing of like having perception as kind of like their increase of perception as a key of transformation for young people. And yeah, so before you carry on, you know what? This has been like a really stimulating conversation. So things are just still flowing in my head at the moment. But Patience used that phrase of it takes a village to raise a child. But there's another African proverb that says that the child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth as well. So there's that too. But yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I want to combine two of your quotes together because they're very similar. It says, at the moment, young people are being labeled as the problem, when actually the truth is that young people are the solution because they are the future. Okay, that's one quote. Second one says, unfortunately, all too often the conversation or language is about the knife crime epidemic, but no one talks of how there is a lack of empowerment epidemic. So you could do them separately. Yeah, I'm happy to repeat the second one, or you could combine it together. I think they're very similar.
No, it's fine. I think with the first one, I think we're living in an era where like young people. So if you open a newspaper, young people will be labeled as the issue. In school, some young people will be labeled as the issue. But essentially, they are the next generation. So they're the only solution to what's going to happen in the world. They're the only solution to what's going to change because they are going to be the change makers. So I think rather than labeling them as the issue, I think when you start looking at them as the solution to, and I'm not saying we have to like put a burden and, make them become adults really quickly. I'm definitely not saying that, but I'm just saying that when you start including them into conversations that we're having. So for me, for example, this is not criticism, by the way, but I'm just already thinking like if we had this conversation and the conversation we're having now in this conference, if we had young people's voice in here, it would have been a very different conversation. And I think for the young person to have that experience as well is a really great stepping stone for them to start learning about the world and how the world functions too. So my thing as well is I work in Fight for Peace, by the way. So one of the things that I do in Fight for Peace is youth leadership. And I know that's a phrase that's been thrown around a lot. But I really work on an aspect where young people are really having a level of transparency of why something's happening, how it's happening, how we include them in conversation, being able to talk to them about things and changes and stuff like that. So I do believe that they're the solution. Now the second part was yes, please.
Yep. Unfortunately, all too often the conversation or language is about the knife crime epidemic, but no one talks about how there is a lack of empowerment epidemic.
Yeah, so I believe that language is really important, and I also believe that the more we focus on the problem, that problem is going to stay there. So, for example, VRU is called the Violence Reduction Unit. They could have called it empowerment increase, whatever they could have called it. They could have called it something different. And a lot of the times, what I realized is that the knife crime is happening because of something else, because of lack of something else. So why not focus on what the lack is and then increase that or create that, and then that knife epidemic wouldn't be happening per se. But I think language is really important, and obviously it's not as easy as said. But yeah, or maybe it's easier done than said. Who knows?
Okay, excellent. I would like to round off something which you said once that kind of got me thinking for a while, and how that would look in schools. You said this, it sounds a bit backwards, but the concept is to train staff to become better space holders for them, i.e. the youth, to become the leaders themselves.
So I can say that one more time? Sure.
What you said, it sounds a bit backwards, but the concept is to train staff to become better space holders for them, i.e. better space holders for the youth, to become the leaders. So it was looking at, again, it was around the discussion of solutions for young people and how to move forward.
Yeah, so I think
that use of that language, space holders.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Hopefully it's not too long-winded. So for example, in Fight for Peace, we had a lot of conversation around youth leadership, and a lot of the times, like, the focus has always been on young people. We've got to make young people the leaders. We've got to do this for young people. We've got to do that thing for young people. But one of the things that kind of hit my head was around the adults are the space holders for them to do that, right? So why don't we teach the adults how to become more familiar with what youth leadership is and how to do youth leadership? And then if they are the space holders, they can create better spaces for those young people. So a lot of times, we talk about this thing, we want to change the world, and, it starts with us, but it really does start with us. For example, I'm just thinking in school settings, in school environment, if someone says we want young people to do X, Y, and Z, they want them to be better, why don't we learn how to facilitate that space better? Why don't we become more efficient and more effective on how to create that space for those young people? Because a lot of times we can shift the responsibility. We can say, oh, young people's behavior, this, that is happening, whatever. But at what point can we take responsibility and say, actually, I've got much more room to grow, I've got much more room to develop, and I can become a better professional, and I can hold better space for those young people. Because that we know that learning is it doesn't stop after school, after college, university, whatever. It never stops. It's a long life journey. So at what point do we hold ourselves responsible? And I don't mean this in a negative type of way. I'm not saying we're not doing enough. I'm just saying, at what point do we say we can do more, and we can hold those spaces in a better way for young people, because they need it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. But before you go, we've already said that you're a manager at Fight for Peace. Could you just quickly tell people what Fight for Peace is, so if anybody that could benefit from it, they could pop over and where Fight for Peace is, please?
Yeah. So Fight for Peace is actually next to New Directions. I'm seeing some familiar faces already, which is nice. But yeah, Fight for Peace in North Woolwich. Our nearest station is King George V. We are combat sports and martial arts based academy. We do other things like education, not necessarily like school education. It's different type of education. We do employability support. We have mentoring. We have youth leadership, that's how we kind of run the academy. That's our drive as well. And essentially we've been there since 2007. But the history of that project is really interesting. It started in Brazil in the year 2000. Luke Downey, he was working in the favelas. So essentially, that kind of the principles of working with young people that were involved in crime, as essentially he brought that to London in 2007. And yeah, we work in communities affected by crime and violence. I've been doing youth work for about coming up to 9 years now. Unfortunately, I've lost some young people. I was working with some young people been shot but didn't necessarily pass away, and then went down the criminal path. There's so many young people I work with. By this point, I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's been a journey. So this type of work, I don't think is for anyone or for everyone. But yeah, I've been about.
Excellent, thank you. Just to round off, what age groups do you work with?
7 to 25. So it's kind of like we've got like a little gap. So it's 7 to 14, and then 14 to 25. That's how we kind of structured it. So we do prevention work, which is obviously 7 to 14, and then 14 to 25 is kind of like it's not always about prevention. It's more about kind of dealing with young people where they might be involved in certain things. But we work with young people from all kinds of walks. It's not just young people that are involved in criminal activities. It's literally everyone. We might have some uni students, but that's why it works so well, like you might have someone that might be on the street life, they might be selling drugs, but they're talking to someone that's at university, and they're exchanging perspectives on life, and then that's a beautiful thing when people can just mix and whatnot. So yeah,
excellent. Thank you very much for your time. It's been really wonderful. It's been great having you here, Leonos, manager for Fight for Peace. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our speakers that were present. So Patience, thank you very much. You spoke to us about challenging family lives. David Mordy, thank you very much. Spoke to us about young people can be resilient given time and direction. Joanna, thank you very much for telling us about combating childhood trauma and informed us about attachment theory and the works of CAMS and art therapy, the usefulness for that. Thank you very much, Patricia Andrews, for bouncer backability. Guys, pick up those words, bouncer backability. I love that word. Investing in children and young people's future. And last but not least, once again, thank you very much, Leonis, for talking to us. Children are the solution. So if there's anybody that has a question they would like to ask our guest speakers, please, this is the time.
Chuck?
Yes.
We are fortunate to have Melinda Robbins online.
Oh,
I know
excellent.
Melinda has done extensive work on trauma and in trauma-informed practice. I wonder whether she can come on and just extend our kind of understanding of what David was saying about trauma and how adults kind of hold on to that as individuals into their adulthood. So I'm just putting her on the spot. I wonder whether she's going to come on.
Yes, Melinda, thank you very much. We really appreciate. I know you've been put on the spot, but it'd be great to hear from you.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. I can, certainly.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Thanks, Pat, for that. Yes, I do feel a bit on the spot, but I mean, it's been really interesting hearing everybody's contributions and really sort of illuminating stuff. And thank you for organising, Chuck. And I really look forward. I hope I get an invite to the seminar. So that would be really interesting to extend a lot of these conversations. Going back to what Pat was saying, I suppose my interest in trauma and attachment is very much kind of rooted within education, because that is my background, although I'm kind of in a sort of transition in terms of training to be a counsellor and therapist. So but it's very much, I suppose, my experiences are very much rooted in education. And I don't know if many people know, but I used to work in at New Improves. New Directions was always my baby. I set it up along with other kind of leaders within Newham about 20 odd years ago. So it's always, working with vulnerable children has always been sort of a real passion of mine, along with social justice and inclusion, etc. And I started to become interested in trauma-informed and attachment approaches I would say about 10 years ago. I did a really inspiring course at the Kaspari Centre, and that helped me really understand some of the kind of emotional needs of our children. I think I'd got to a stage in my learning within a PRU context that it wasn't just about offering a vocational or differentiating the curriculum or teaching and learning. It was really about kind of understanding what's behind behaviours. And so that's kind of, I suppose, in a nutshell, led me to where my journey is now and where I'm continuing to go. But I suppose the broader question I have is, and it's particularly within an education context, how do we train staff? How do we change the system, the education system, to ensure that children's voices are heard, children's lives are understood, given all the kind of pressures in terms of lack of funding, lack of resources. You know, CAMS is really stretched. Teachers' budgets, head teachers' budgets are really stretched. There are lots of challenges, and how do we kind of mitigate some of that, I suppose, is the question that I'm asking myself, and that I'm asking of others, within the kind of broader kind of movement around trauma-informed practices. How do we change the system? Because there are people within education that actually don't believe in therapeutic approaches within education. And we have to understand that the context within education is that it's very sort of driven by results and league tables, etc. So how do we how is there a compromise made between those, I suppose, is the broader question. Sorry, I meandered a bit there, but I don't know if anyone could help or have any suggestions regarding that. Chuck, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, because it's very useful, because in raising questions, it triggers thinking processes, which hopefully leads to answers, and it brings us all the way back in full circle to how I'd introduce this conference, in that actions begin with a thought, and subsequent thoughts are influenced by our observations and our experiences. And you've just given some questions that's hopefully our guests and indeed speakers will go away with thinking, okay, what does the solution to some of the issues you raised look like? So it has been very useful and impactful indeed. Joanna, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, I will share my 2 pence of
yeah,
thought.
please, absolutely.
I think with schools, everything starts with policy. And we don't have an empowering policy that I've seen, or the voice of the child policy, call it what you like. But a policy might be a good start, or a trauma-informed practice policy. We talk about school approach, but how can we really deliver on that? We need time, I think. We need to stop running like headless chickens in schools and find the time to do things properly, because I think if we're always in a crisis modus, apparently things are hard. Those are my thoughts. I'm going to stop now, so other people want to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's about having good policies and procedures in place. So changing from a behaviour policy perhaps to a relationships policy. It's about how we relate to each other. So policies are really important, I think. Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Is there any other contributions or questions, please?
Yeah, sorry. I've got a question for Melinda. Actually, I've got a question for everyone. Just it's related to this question, because I'm thinking of something, but then I need to ask the question before I say what I'm thinking about. The question is, who's in charge? Like, when it comes to schools, who's in charge? Like, can someone, who will be the person that says, I want to introduce this new type of class to the school system? Who does that?
So, could you rephrase that again, please?
Yeah. So, for example, like, I don't know, if let's say let's say from Monday, there's a new class that's been introduced in the school system, and the class is called Get to Know Yourself 101 or whatever. I'm just making it up right now. Yeah. Who's in charge of who do we need to talk to? How do we need to get this class going? Like, what's the process to introduce this class to the school system?
Is this used? Oh.
I guess also to some extent I'm also asking, like, who holds the power to making that happen?
Can I answer part of that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
That would answer part. That would be potentially, as what Joanne says, down to policy, and it's down to the actual direction of the school. Melinda mentioned about league tables and results and outcomes. You'll find that, because I'm going into quite a few schools now and helping out head teachers, Melinda's coming along with me, and they are stretched in terms of just doing even the basics. We're finding that obviously attendance and just coming into school is a big thing for teachers. So in terms of additional areas to work on and focus on, head teachers are finding it very difficult to do the add-ons and do the kind of like the right sort of interventions. They are just doing the basics at the moment. So policy is the first place to start. What direction does the school want to make? And I just put a question in the chat about taking it right back to the bare bones. I think because you know that AI is going to be big in education fairly soon, and they're thinking about AI coming into the PRUs. Now, I'm doing some kind of work with the tech companies now, and they're looking to introduce AIs into PRUs. And I'm saying, well, how's that going to work? Because as adults, as David said, the trust from the adults and the adults in front of the child has got to be paramount. So when you've got a robot in front of you and you've got these questions you're asking the robot, you're going to get the right answers. You're going to get kind of skewed answers. And you're so right. Is it Leo? Yes. Yes. And you're so right. I think it's so good that if you had additional kind of lessons around what you're saying about, having the professionals come in and do the extra bits that schools can't do, I think it'd be really, really good. But it's policy and it's the direction of the school and the head and SLT and the governors. Is that what they want to do as a school? Because it's all about outcomes and league tables. And that's what parents look at, unfortunately. This is why it's called the hidden kind of curriculum. And it's a shame because it shouldn't be. It should be everything. I'm part of a governing body, and we wouldn't even touch on this. All I hear all the time is about outcomes, and it's such a shame because I know that they've now just created a wellbeing centre, and guess who's attending the wellbeing centre for trauma and mental health? The male population. They are finding it very difficult at the moment, the male population. I couldn't believe the statistics when I saw it, that more of the male community are self-referring themselves. So the need for policy to change and the direction of schools kind of vision to change and see, as you say, young people are more self-aware and there's more about empathy now. And things need to kind of have a big shift. But it goes back to teacher training. What are they doing in the universities? That's the thing. So I hope I've answered a bit of the question.
And also, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And also, I think it goes back to government policy as well. Yeah, because at the end, there's been huge issues, of course, with Ofsted. So. There is a framework that schools are inspected on, and we know that it's not where we want it to be. But if there was more focus, for instance, around social, emotional, mental health, in Ofsted, for instance, or so it's government policy, it's Ofsted, it's policies and procedures, and also it's about winning hearts and minds of school leaders. Not everyone thinks these approaches are the right approaches. Yeah, so it's how do we sort of how do we win hearts and minds? And if we know these approaches work, we know that if our staff are trained in attachment and trauma informed approaches, we know that relational approaches, building relationships, and as Pat was saying, I'm going into schools as well with Pat, and how do you tell a teacher who sees 30 kids, times how many in a week in a class to build a relationship? It's really hard. And that requires a structural change, doesn't it? In terms of, the curriculum, the timetable. How do you do that in a secondary school? It's really hard.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Melinda, you're speaking. Sorry, I thought you was...
It's fine. I finished.
Okay, so I actually agree with everything you guys have said, and I think Leo made a quote earlier when he said we got to take more responsibilities on ourselves and how to make a change. Yes, of course, to change the education system. To talk about the education system quickly, actually, because someone else also mentioned that the young people are the answer and the young people are the future. So if the young people are the future and we know the future is changing and we're trying to educate these young people on an education system that is becoming outdated, at what point do we start to change the education system? Because we're teaching them a lot of things that are no longer valuable or needed in this day and age. So Pat just mentioned AI. I think Leo mentioned, I know you said as a joke, but like, get to know yourself 101. That is actually a thing. I think one of the old school philosophers, a powerful quote was, know thyself. And a lot of us don't know ourselves. We're just walking, knowing so much about the external world and getting so stimulated by what's going on outside, and we lack what's going on within. What is going on within me? How do we educate these young people? So yes, it does take the government to change things, but at the same time, us adults have to take some sort of responsibility upon ourselves to become archetypes for these young people to want to emulate. So yes, like Chuck said, I was carrying books in the school. I was doing that on purpose because a king or a queen has to watch a queen to become a queen, and a king has to watch a king or observe a king to become a king. Princes can't be raised. Like a prince can't raise a prince to become a king. A king can only do that. But so essentially what I mean by that is, for example, let's say I was one of the young people that Leo was working with and he becomes an archetype and I emulate. I want to look up to him. I look up to him and I want to become like him. That's because he's now a positive role model in my life. He's a king that I envision to become like. He rules an empire. He runs certain things. He moves a certain way. He's got logical thinking, problem solving skills. And likewise, if a young woman's watching, let's say Pat, and she's in a feminine energy, works within her spirituality and all these other little things and nurturing skills and empathy, she would naturally look up to Pamela. I want to emulate that. So I say that to say, us adults have to take the responsibility on ourselves, go and learn, educate ourselves on whatever it is that we think these young people are interested in. So that could be cryptocurrency, technology, artificial intelligence, trauma, whatever it is. And you just start pouring into them in classes. When you're teaching, for example, in maths, just drop that in there. Just little bars, boop, boop, boop. You will notice they'll start picking up on it. And before you know, they'll go off at home and start looking into it. So the whole system don't need to change. We just need to take some sort of initiatives and go and learn them and educate them on that. That's just my
I absolutely agree. I think everything you said is just spot on. And there's a book by someone called Paul Dix, and he says the title of the book is "When Adults Change, Everything Changes."
Absolutely.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that's, what you're saying there is absolutely spot on. We are the ones that have got to model. We're the ones that have got to model behaviours, change the system. So it is down to us.
Just a quick one. Yeah. And to add to that, that's where I come in when I say the parents, the carers, the environment that the child is being raised in or lives in is very crucial, is very important. So if the family is lacking, the parents are lacking, we must step in there, or the system must step in there and empower the carers, the parents, in order for them to empower their children, because the children will copy the carers and the parents, because I know my children copy me.
Can I say something? I mentioned policies, and I agree with Pat then, who went to talk about SLT and governance. But I do think policies can also start from down up, and it can start with a proposal that anyone can do, and with a working group that anyone can create, a working group or a special interest group, and start drafting and sharing ideas and brainstorming and getting ideas together. So spaces for reflection. How do we really think about trauma-informed practices? Do we have clinical supervision? Do we really stop to think? And do we have that self-reflection? That would be absolutely basic. I think I'm saying what everybody else is saying. But if we're not stopping to think, because trauma anyways doesn't stay with the child. This trauma is everywhere in the school. Is in the space, is in the air. So really a good point to address it all is to think about our experiences. We can't change a child, but we can change our interactions. And I don't think is going to do that in a way that is attuned enough. But I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it. But it can't really replace the gaze of the mother. It can't really replace that bond, the responsiveness that humans can have with humans. I'm not sold yet. It is. Let's see what will unfold. But I think everybody can change the world, and kids can, and adults, and a working group create budding systems and prefects and throwing ideas. I think SLT would listen.
Like I said earlier, it's a really stimulating conversation. Like I thought of so many different things that wasn't part of what we was talking about, and it's kind of connected as well at the same time. But yeah, Chuck, it's been an amazing experience.
Oh, awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been an amazing experience. I've certainly learned a lot, both from working with you and interviewing yourselves and having you here to expand on your views and experiences that will benefit our young people. And I truly, truly appreciate it. And I hope that our audience have gone away with a lot more than they woke up this morning with. And pick from the questions and statements you made to inform their decisions. I do know we have one person, I don't know if you're still here, who is about to go into teacher training and specifically wants to get on board to see what some of the things I suspect that they may not learn from teacher training, to give them advanced heads up in what they are going to encounter in schools. So thank you very much for that. And for the member of the audience that was dialing from abroad, really appreciate your presence, and I hope you learned and informs your practices in your home country. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for today. Thank you, our speakers.
We had some little ones yesterday at one of the Prues in St John's Wood, and it was so good. We did like a little assembly on giving out certificates and medals, and they've never got a medal or a certificate in their whole lives. And you should they didn't want to put it down.
Mm-hmm.
And we gave them T-shirts as well. They wore that T-shirt all day. So it's little things, little projects like that, and
enjoying it.
Yeah, lifted up their spirits.
I'm loving it.
Yeah,
loving it.